After 7 years of marriage, my husband Troy Shu fell in love with Vivi Lin, the newly hired accountant at his company. He said, "Meeting her made me realize what true love really is." For the sake of his love, he allowed Vivi Lin to provoke my seriously ill aunt to death and locked our 4-year-old daughter in the car, causing her to suffocate. In utter despair, I drove my car into Troy Shu and Vivi Lin, ending our lives together. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to 7 years ago. To the scene of my wedding with Troy Shu. After the host finished a long speech, he asked, "Mr. Troy Shu, do you take Miss Kira to be your wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" Troy Shu froze for a moment, then suddenly shook off my hand and said coldly, "I do not." I lowered my head, concealing the surging emotions in my eyes. What a coincidence. "I'm not willing either." The whole room erupted in murmurs. The guests never expected to encounter such a scene at a wedding, and they huddled together whispering. The host's smile froze on his face, completely unprepared for the groom, who had just been beaming with joy, to suddenly change his expression. He paused for a moment and quickly changed the subject. "Oh, it seems our groom is still a bit nervous. Let's all listen to a song first and give him some time to adjust." As the music started playing, the host shot us a meaningful look, signaling us to quickly resolve the conflict. At the very least, not to make a scene in front of the guests. He meant well, but Troy Shu didn't appreciate it. He snatched the microphone and said, "I'm sorry to waste everyone's time. Today's wedding is cancelled. Here, I solemnly declare to everyone, I, Troy Shu, would never marry Kira Shen even if all the women in the world were dead." He looked at me, his eyes full of disgust. "Kira Shen, don't even dream of marrying me in this lifetime." With that, he threw down the microphone and walked off the stage with a triumphant look. He just forgot. This wasn't 7 years later, and he wasn't that highly respected Mr. Shu. Before he could even step down, a figure rushed toward him like the wind and slapped him hard across the face. "Shu, you have the nerve to say another word. Do you think our Kira is easy to bully?" The woman was dressed in a red chipao. Her makeup was immaculate, and the corsage she wore marked her as a relative of the bride. Still not satisfied after the first slap, she took advantage of Troy Shu's dazed state and struck him again with the back of her hand. "You scumbag, you begged to marry Kira back then, and now you're showing your true colors so soon. And all the women in the world, do you think you're an emperor who can pick and choose any woman you want?" The woman's furious scolding made the people around them snap out of their daze and quickly step in to separate them. But whether the people pulling them apart were intentionally slacking or had underestimated her fighting ability, Troy Shu ended up getting kicked a few more times in the process. Seeing how full of energy the woman was, I couldn't hold back any longer and called out tearfully, "Auntie." Hearing my voice, my aunt, who was just rolling up her sleeves ready to take on the world, immediately turned around, hugged me, and comforted me softly. "Kira, don't cry, that scumbag doesn't want to marry you. Well, we don't want to marry him either. Don't be sad, Auntie will introduce you to someone better in the future." Leaning in my aunt's arms, listening to her strong heartbeat, my tears poured out in big drops, and my lips trembled so much I couldn't speak. It had been so long since I had seen my aunt so healthy and full of life. My parents passed away unexpectedly when I was 4. At that time, my aunt was just in her early 20s, but she resolutely took on the responsibility of raising me. She even broke up with her first love for this reason and never married afterward. I gave up a stable job to start a business with Troy Shu. My aunt scolded us for being reckless, but in private, she did her best to support us financially. When we faced a crisis and nearly went bankrupt, she sold her house, worked tirelessly, and helped us pull through. My aunt was good to me and also did Troy Shu a great favor, but that ungrateful Troy Shu, along with his mistress Vivi Lin, barged into my aunt's hospital room and spilled everything, which infuriated her to the point of causing her death. Even when I confronted them, they said she was so sick and about to die anyway. Vivi just helped her find relief sooner. Fortunately, I was reborn, and at this time, my aunt was still healthy. Thank goodness, thank goodness. Wiping away my tears, I said to Troy Shu, "Troyshu, are you sure you want to break off the engagement?" Right, probably because I had cried so hard earlier, my eyes were red, and my voice hadn't recovered yet, making me look utterly heartbroken. Everyone around was looking at Troyshu with accusing eyes. And a flicker of guilt passed through his gaze, but it vanished in an instant. He took a deep breath. "Kira, let's call off the engagement. Don't make a scene, it's embarrassing." I held back my aunt, who was about to rush forward and punch him, and lowered my eyelashes to hide my expression. "Fine, let's call off the engagement. I'd like to see how Troyshu manages to grow the company and live happily ever after with his true love without me." Troyshu and I were college classmates. We started dating in our sophomore year and were each other's first love. After graduating, Troy worked for half a year before clashing with his boss and deciding to quit and start his own business. His parents divorced and remarried when he was very young, and after he became an adult, they stopped supporting him. Even his college expenses were covered through student loans and part-time work. He quit his job to start a business, and his family offered no help whatsoever. I felt sorry for him and resolutely quit my job to help. I didn't understand much about the technical side of things, so I did my best in other areas. I handled all the daily meals, document organization, financial bookkeeping, and other tasks for their small studio, staying busy from morning till night every day. I even lost my first child due to overwork. At that time, Troyshu knelt by my hospital bed, crying and swearing. "Kira, I promise, I will make something of myself and make you the happiest woman in the world." He fulfilled the first half of that vow but not the second. In the third year of his startup, his small studio got on track, and he proposed to me. Although we encountered several crises later on, we supported each other and made it through together. The small studio grew into a company, expanding in scale, and he became increasingly busy. Later, our daughter Shinshin was born. To take care of her, my focus shifted more and more toward the family. And I gradually stopped being involved in the company's affairs. Some of the newer employees didn't even know I was the boss's wife. Troyshu also grew increasingly distant toward me, no longer as considerate as he used to be. Although I felt a bit upset, I didn't take it to heart. Instead, I felt sorry for him being so busy with work, so I made sure everything at home was taken care of. Until our 7th wedding anniversary, he called to say he had to work overtime. And then there was no further news from him. I watched the table full of dishes gradually grow cold, and my heart grew cold along with them. I began to investigate the people around Troyshu, surprisingly easy to find out, because he didn't hide it at all. A woman named Vivi Lin. He took her to various high-end venues, brought her to partners' banquets, and introduced her to his friends. They were inseparable, with endless conversations every day. People around them teased and called Vivi Lin sister-in-law, and he just smiled but never denied it. I told Troyshu to be mindful of boundaries, but he kept saying things like, "You're being petty, you don't understand, and don't make a fuss out of nothing," showing impatience all over. After discovering his change of heart, I privately started consulting a lawyer on how to protect my interests and gain custody of our daughter. I thought the worst-case scenario would be leaving with nothing but our daughter, but I never expected he could be even more ruthless. During the dog days of summer, XNXN had a persistent low-grade fever, and I was suffering from unbearable menstrual cramps. So I had no choice but to ask Troyshu to take XNXN to the hospital. He agreed readily, but changed his destination because of a call from Vivi Lin. The two of them were busy flirting outside. Completely forgetting the young child left in the car, it wasn't until I called to ask about our daughter that he remembered the purpose of his trip and rushed to check on her in the car, but it was already too late. After that, I went crazy and swore to make them pay. Troyshu initially felt a bit guilty, but later he simply gave up all restraint, and the last shred of decency between him and Vivi Lin vanished. I was seething with hatred inside, but I had to pretend nothing was wrong. My aunt was in the late stages of stomach cancer at the time, and I didn't want her to worry about me in her final days. Troyshu had clearly promised not to involve my aunt in the conflict between us, but under Vivi Lin's instigation, he took her to my aunt's hospital room while I was away. The two tried to pressure me into giving in by provoking my aunt, But they never expected that upon hearing the news of XNXN's death and my betrayal, my aunt would die of anger. Even though I ended up killing both of them, the hatred from my past life continues to surge endlessly in my heart. Can rebirth erase all hatred? No, at least I don't think so. Troy Shu and I were college alumni, and we accompanied each other through the entrepreneurial journey, sharing many mutual friends. They didn't know about the past grievances between us. All they saw was Troy Shu acting erratically at his wedding, abandoning his longtime girlfriend, for a while. Everyone around us was sympathizing with me and condemning Troy Shu as a scumbag. I pretended to be upset and spent 2 days organizing materials at home, then rushed to Troy Shu's studio with a few friends. As soon as I entered, I was shocked by the mess inside. The floor was littered with trash. The table was covered with leftover takeout boxes, and the air was filled with an indescribable smell. I looked around and asked the person closest to me, "Where is Troy Shu?" Chen Chen gave an awkward smile. "Sis, are you here to see Troy?" "Sis, I don't deserve that title," I scoffed lightly and said coldly. "Let me ask again. Where is Troy Shu? I have something to discuss with him. Tell him to come out." Chen Chen shrank back and cast a pleading glance at the people around him. The studio wasn't large. Aside from Troy Shu, there were 6 other people, all of whom had attended that farce of a wedding. They looked at each other, and finally, a man in a plaid shirt with heavy dark circles under his eyes stepped forward to answer me. "Troy is out, not here right now." Ju Sai. I dug out this person's name from my memory. In my previous life, he left the company in the 5th year of my marriage to Troy Shu, citing differences in principles. At that time, I hadn't been going to the company much, but since we were friends who had been through tough times together, I called to invite him for a meal upon hearing he was leaving. He didn't agree, only saying over the phone, "Sister Kira, you're a good person. Let me give you a piece of advice. Troy Shu is trash, so be careful." At the time, I thought he said those things because he had a falling out with Troy Shu. It was only later that I realized he had probably seen through the other person's true nature long ago. I took a deep breath and softened my tone. "I have something very important to discuss with Troy Shu. Could you help call him back?" Chen Chen immediately responded, "Okay, sister-in-law, wait a moment, I'll call Troy right away." I frowned but didn't remind him to change the way he addressed me. The phone rang a few times, and Troy Shu's voice came through. "Hello, Chen, what's up? Troy, your sister-in-law is here to see you." The call was abruptly hung up on the other end, leaving Chen Chen, who hadn't finished speaking, looking utterly embarrassed. He forced an awkward smile. "Well, Troy might be busy with something." I cut him off. "No need to explain. Since he's not here today, please pass a message to him for me. The money I invested in the studio, along with the wages he owes me, I want it all paid back immediately. I'm giving him 2 days. If it's not returned by then, I'll have no choice but to involve the court." At the beginning, the studio was struggling. I invested all my savings and even borrowed a significant amount from my aunt. I never asked for a salary while helping Troy Shu with miscellaneous tasks. Back then, he hugged me and said, "With a wife like this, what more could a man ask for?" Now, thinking back, I just feel incredibly foolish. Chen Chen was taken aback and flustered. "Don't do that, sister-in-law. The studio is doing fine. Why suddenly take the money out?" When it came to their own interests, the others also started to persuade her. "Sis, don't be angry. Wait until Troy comes back. And you two can talk it out slowly. Don't make any impulsive decisions." Exactly. You've been together for so many years. Don't let a small matter cause unhappiness. Right, sis? Even if you and Troy have a disagreement, don't take it out on the studio. Okay, everyone was talking at once, seemingly trying to mediate, but in reality, they were blaming me for not knowing what was important. I know the studio is everyone's hard work, and me taking the money and leaving at this time would add pressure to them. But why should I care about them, although they call me sister-in-law? In the end, they are all Troy Shu's friends. In the previous life, Troy Shu and Vivi Lin were ambiguous. As core members of the company and Troy Shu's friends, they more or less knew about it, but they all kept silent and didn't give me any hint. So why should I consider them? Don't tell me all this. Just pass my message to Troy Shu. After all, he had more things to worry about next. "Kira, what on earth are you trying to do?" Picking up the phone, it was Troy Shu's furious roar. "You know, we just invested a sum of money to replace equipment recently, and the payment for the new project hasn't been recovered yet. What do you mean by asking for money at this time?" "So what?" I said expressionlessly. "What does your studio have to do with me?" The person on the other end paused, softening their tone. "Kira, I know you're angry about me calling off the engagement, but you can't just mess with the studio like that. The guys have been working hard with me, and I promised them bonuses by the end of the month." I interrupted impatiently. "Troy Shu, just tell me, are you going to pay me back or not? If not, I'll take legal action. Don't blame me later when you get a court summons." After a moment of silence, the voice on the other end grew low. "Are you really this heartless? Don't you care at all about what we had, or the friends at the studio? What kind of bond?" Troy Shu probably thought I was still the soft-hearted and naive Kira from before, assuming I was angry at him for being left at the altar and trying to guilt-trip me. "What kind of bond do we have? The kind where I endured hardships with you only to be humiliated by you at our wedding?" Troy Shu probably recalled his actions right after his rebirth and was left speechless. If he were to bring up being hit and killed in a previous life, people would surely think he's insane. Not even bothering to come up with a more believable excuse to shift the blame, he sighed, his tone weary. "Can you give me some more time? Believe me, the studio will definitely make money, and I'll pay you back double then." "No," I said firmly. After all, my goal was to make things difficult for him, not to make money off him. Realizing that he couldn't get through to me, Troy Shu had no choice but to hang up the phone after saying, "You're ruthless." Even if I forcefully demanded that money back, it wouldn't immediately cause his studio to collapse, but it could certainly make things difficult for them financially for a while. Taking advantage of this time, I'll figure out a way to sabotage the orders he can get. After giving it some thought, I called my aunt again. "Auntie, could you talk to Uncle Ju about the rent for Troy Shu's studio and ask him not to give them a discount anymore? Do I need you to remind me?" "Don't worry. I already told my aunt. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have helped." What a waste of a favor. In the early days of the studio, Troy Shu didn't have much money and couldn't afford a good workspace. He looked everywhere but couldn't find a suitable place, and even got mocked by an agent who said, "If you can't afford it, don't rent." I secretly asked my aunt for help. Through a friend she knew from her sales job, Uncle Ju, we managed to rent the current location at a price below market rate. To protect Troy Shu's pride, I didn't tell him I had helped, instead attributing it to the landlord's appreciation for him. Now that I think about it, what kind of love-struck fool was I back then? I shook my head to get the water out and said coquettishly, "Auntie, you're amazing. By the way, Auntie, why don't we go to the hospital for a checkup together?" "Go to the hospital? Kira, are you feeling unwell somewhere?" No. I just suddenly realized it's been a long time since we had a health check. "Auntie, please come with me, Tilda." "You Tilda, all right. All right, just make the appointment and let me know when it's time." After hanging up the phone, I breathed a sigh of relief. In this lifetime, I will make sure to remind my aunt to take care of her health, and I won't let her end up like she did in my previous life. In this lifetime, we will all be just fine. Troy Shu later came to plead with me again. Even asking our mutual friend to come over and act as a persuader, I remained unmoved and gave him an ultimatum. He asked me to find time to go to his studio so we could have a detailed talk. My intuition told me something was fishy, so I asked someone to keep an eye on him for a few days. Unexpectedly, they uncovered a huge scandal. Troy Shu has been going to a high school frequently these days and behaving intimately with one of the female students. The moment I saw the photo, I immediately recognized the female high school student in it as Vivi Lin. For a moment, I didn't know whether to praise Troy Shu for his devotion or scold him for being blinded by lust. Vivi Lin is 8 years younger than him and is still underage at this point. Hire someone to collect evidence that proves their close relationship. I found a few strong bodyguards to accompany me to meet Troy Shu. When I first arrived at the studio, it was quiet inside, the lights were off, and it was pitch black. "Troy Shu, where are you?" I cautiously stopped at the door and asked the bodyguard beside me to go in instead. The bodyguard nodded and carefully walked in. Within seconds, the sound of tables and chairs falling over and people screaming came from inside. "Ah, who are you? Hurry, 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 help quickly." With a snap, the light illuminated the scene before me. Troy Shu was pinned to the ground by the bodyguard, his hands twisted behind his back. The others in the studio gathered around, trying to pull the two apart. Seeing me, Chen Chen's eyes lit up. "Sis-in-law." He took 2 steps toward me but stopped when he noticed the burly bodyguard beside me, asking timidly, "Sis-in-law, are these people with you?" I ignored him, crossed my arms, and looked at Troy Shu, who was pinned to the ground, asking, "Why did you call me here?" Troy Shu struggled but couldn't break free, so he had no choice but to show weakness. "Kira, what do you mean by this? I should be the one asking you that, shouldn't I? If I had been the one who walked in earlier, it would be me pinned to the ground, right? Sis, you've got it all wrong. Troy wanted to surprise you." Chen Chen quickly interjected, pointing to the cake on the nearby table and the decorations all over the room. "Troy wanted to celebrate your birthday and make peace with you." I gestured to the bodyguard, and Troy Shu quickly stood up, straightened his clothes, and forced a bitter smile. "Sorry, Kira, I made you misunderstand. I just remembered that today is your birthday and wanted to celebrate it for you." A faint melancholy lingered between his brows, and the smile at the corner of his lips carried a touch of sorrow, making him look like a pitiful soul who had been wronged. I have to admit, his acting is quite impressive. Clap, clap, clap. I clapped my hands, full of admiration. "Troy Shu, I never realized before how great your acting skills are. It's such a waste of talent that you're not in the acting industry." He remained silent, while his friends around him began to stand up for him. "Sis, isn't that a bit unfair? Do you have any idea how much effort Troy put into preparing this birthday party? What couple doesn't argue, sis? You and Troy have been together for so many years. Can't you just forgive him this once? Troy did do something wrong. But sister-in-law, are you completely blameless? Troy works so hard all for the sake of giving you a better life in the future. Isn't it understandable that he had an emotional breakdown?" "Enough!" Troy Shu shouted, stopping the conversation. His eyes filled with sorrow as he looked at me. "Don't say any more, it's my fault, Kira." His friends were about to say something more, but I raised my hand and signaled to the bodyguards beside me. Several large men in black stepped forward, their imposing presence instantly silencing the noisy crowd. I walked over to the table, reached out, and tore off the decorations pasted on it, letting out a cold laugh. "You really have let me down. Was your thoughtful preparation just some ugly, cheap decorations and a cake you bought on a whim, or was it putting on a disgusting act to brush me off?" Before Troy Shu could answer, I continued, "Do you think you're so great? Oh, for the sake of the studio, you can force yourself to please the ex-girlfriend you despise. You really know how to endure humiliation." Troy Shu's muscles tensed, the anger in his eyes seeming to overflow. "Kira, I can hear you, no need to shout." I glanced at him, pulled over a stool, and sat down. "Troy Shu, don't play games with me. I'll say it one more time. Pay me back, or we'll see each other in court." "I can't guarantee what will happen to your studio then." Several people in the studio glared at me with hatred. I pointed at one of them and said, "Hey, do you have a problem with me?" That person didn't expect to be singled out and nervously looked away. "Why are any of you upset with me? What's wrong with me wanting my money back? Or was it wrong of me to lend you money to help you through the toughest times? A bunch of ungrateful people." Someone couldn't hold back and shouted, "How are we ungrateful? Isn't it true? Ask yourselves, in these 3 years, where have I not been good to you? Food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. Which of these haven't I taken care of for you? I've been more responsible than your own mothers. But what have you done? I was dumped and humiliated by that scumbag beside you. And in the end, it's my fault. Your talent for twisting the truth really runs in the same vein. No wonder you're friends." As I spoke, my emotions grew more intense. Although I knew from my past life that these people were no good, facing them now still made me feel that my past self wasn't worth it, probably still feeling a bit of shame. a group of people guiltily lowered their heads, seeing that no one was stepping up to defend him. Choi Shu spoke up again. Kira, I know you're angry, but you can't take it out on innocent people, can you? I laughed in frustration. Choi Shu, your ability to shift blame has really improved. I can't be bothered to argue with you. Just one question, are you paying me back or not? If not, I'm leaving right now and letting the court handle it. Kira, how could you? 1. Don't be so unreasonable. 2. 3. If you don't want to talk, then let's not talk, let's go. I motioned for the bodyguards to leave. But Choi Shu stopped me just as we were about to exit. I'll pay. I extended my hand. Why didn't you say so earlier? Hand over the money. Not today. Under the pressure of my gaze, he added, tomorrow. I need some time to sort things out. I'll transfer the money to you by tomorrow night at the latest, including the wages from these past few years. You better calculate it all clearly for me. He gritted his teeth and said, don't worry, you won't be shortchanged. After making Choi Shu repeat his promise to repay the money and recording it, I left with my bodyguard. He looked at me, as if with a sigh. You weren't like this before. Heh, I let out a short laugh. Choi Shu, stop pretending. Be careful, your little girlfriend might get angry. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone around looked at him in shock. Choi Shu quickly denied it. What are you talking about? What little girlfriend do I have? It seems he also knows he didn't do the right thing by not telling the people around him about Vivilin. But I have no obligation to cover for him. If she's not your girlfriend, why are you hugging and cuddling? If she's not your girlfriend, why are you going to a hotel? Is she? No, that's not it. I didn't. Although he refused to admit it, Choi Shu's reaction said it all. Those who still wanted to persuade me, the studio members, all fell silent at once. I took one last look at the studio decorated with balloons and stickers, and never looked back. Choi Shu, if you want to deceive someone next time, at least put in a little effort. Today isn't my birthday at all. My daughter Shinshin's birthday is 3 days apart from mine, but after getting married, I stopped making a fuss and only celebrate Shinshin's birthday. At first, Choi Shu still remembered to give me a gift on my birthday. Later, it turned into buying a cake for both me and Shinshin on her birthday. Then, he became so busy being affectionate with Vivi Lin that he didn't even have time for Shinshin's birthday. As for my birthday, the Choi Shu from 7 years ago might have remembered. But the Choi Shu of today has long forgotten. Choi Shu repaid the money quite punctually, and the amount wasn't short either. He even sent a message specifically saying, let's part on good terms, whether it was to prevent me from continuing to make a scene or to keep me from exposing his affair with Vivi Lin. I couldn't say. As soon as I got the money, my next plan was set in motion. It was still early days, although the studio had gained some recognition. It would take another year for it to truly take off, thanks to a combination of policy changes and opportunities. During this period, I took on almost all the miscellaneous tasks at the studio, including client communication. In other words, I have contact information for most of the clients. With memories from a past life, I also know who the potential clients are. Sharing this as insider information with those who need it not only earns me favors but also diverts business that originally belonged to Choi Shu's studio. Because of the debt repayment, the bonuses he originally promised to the studio team are definitely off the table. If no more business comes in, even future salaries will be at risk. The people in the studio are Choi Shu's friends, but even brothers keep accounts clear, without any profit. Would they still follow Choi Shu without hesitation, even if they are willing? Would their families allow them to tie themselves to a sinking ship? After playing the role of their caretaker for 3 years, I can't control them, but I can still spread ambiguous messages to stir up their families. As for Choi Shu, after being the boss Shu 4 years, can he still humble himself to discuss business? Can he remain calm while working with people who might eventually clash with him? There's also Vivi Lin, who created a big mess for herself, a grown adult dating an underage girl. I don't need to step in, society will condemn him. I leaked this information to Vivi Lin's family, and they did make a scene at Choi Shu's studio once. But in the end, Choi Shu managed to calm them down. And they even seemed pleased with the relationship. almost as if they were accepting him as a son-in-law. I don't feel the slightest bit sorry. What kind of decent family would allow their underage daughter to associate with shady individuals just for money? At the slightest sign of Troy Shu's bankruptcy, they would immediately turn into jackals, squeezing every last bit of value out of him. I am extremely patient, digging the pit little by little, quietly waiting for the day the empire collapses. 4 months into the rebirth, 2 people left Troy Shu's studio due to unpaid wages. He tried his best to persuade him to stay, but the man said, "Troy, it's not that I don't want to help you, but I have to think about my family, right? If I stay here and still can't make any money, how am I supposed to pay the mortgage and car loans? My wife is already 7 months pregnant, and having a child will bring another big expense. I can't just let them starve. Can I?" If you're wondering how I know all this, it's because of another person who left, Jusai. "What did you want to talk to me about?" Jusai was still wearing that plaid shirt, with dark circles under his eyes so heavy they looked like smoky makeup. Holding his coffee cup, he looked a bit uneasy. "Kira, I want to apologize for what happened the day you came to the studio. I'm really sorry. I had no idea Troy Shu had already cheated on you. I thought he genuinely wanted to get back together." "Enough, let's cut to the chase." I waved my hand. "We've talked enough about unrelated things. Let's get straight to the point." He lowered his head, took a sip of coffee, glanced at me furtively, and then asked quietly, "Kira, could you lend me some money? Borrow money?" I was taken aback. "Why would you come to me for a loan?" Jusai lowered his head even further, his knuckles turning pale from the excessive force. "The studio hasn't been doing well lately, and everyone's struggling. My dad fell and needs surgery, and after scraping together what I could, I'm still a bit short, just 30,000, Sister Kira. You know my skills. I'll find a new job quickly and pay you back as soon as I get my salary." I paused for a moment before recalling that something similar had happened in my past life. Only back then, I hadn't suddenly withdrawn funds or schemed behind the scenes. Jusai had received his bonus and salary, and the pressure wasn't as intense as it is now. At this point in time, various small loan platforms hadn't yet emerged, so he probably had no choice but to grit his teeth and come to me. What about Troy Shu? Even if he paid me back, he shouldn't be so broke that he doesn't even have 30,000. Right, after all, the person I asked to keep an eye on him told me that he had just sent a lot of nice things to Vivi Lin's house a few days ago. Jusai didn't say a word, but a faint trace of resentment flickered in his eyes. I understood. That guy Troy Shu is so petty. It's already a sign of his restraint that he didn't kick Jusai out of the team immediately after his rebirth. Lending money, absolutely impossible, but the others don't have memories of their past lives. All they see is Troy Shu's cold-heartedness, unwilling to lend a hand to a longtime friend. TSK. This is such a perfect opportunity to bring him down. I pretended to think for a moment and replied, "Sure." His eyes lit up, and before he could express his thanks, I continued, "I can also introduce you to a job with good pay. The boss is nice, and if you pass the interview, he might even be willing to give you an advance on your salary." The company I mentioned was actually the biggest competitor of Troy Shu in my past life. I had previously connected with them after disrupting Troy Shu's business. Regardless of the character of the few people in the studio, they do have skills. If I introduce them, the company will definitely want them. I looked at Jusai, hinting at something. "You can all go and give it a try." Jusai understood my meaning and said solemnly, "Thank you, Sister Kira. I'll ask the others if they want to come with me." Jusai was very proactive and reported the results to me just a week later. The outcome was impressive. He managed to persuade 2 more people to jump ship with him. Troy Shu is probably still wondering why, even after a rebirth, he ended up worse off. He knows a lot of information, but now he is just the owner of a small studio, with a status not high enough to even have the chance to connect with some of his former partners. However, if he settles down and works diligently, it's not impossible for him to climb back to his former status, and what I need to do is to prevent him from working peacefully. Due to staff turnover and a decrease in business volume, Troy Shu's studio is on the verge of disbanding. At this point, he didn't even have time to accompany Vivi Lin, let alone her family. I hired a few middle-aged women to wander around the park and residential area near Vivi Lin's home, occasionally chatting about the children's work matters, and they mentioned Troy Shu's studio multiple times. After a few days of fishing, we finally hooked Vivi Lin's parents, guiding them to ask about it themselves, and then adding fuel to the fire by telling them a bunch of inside information. The final conclusion was, Troy Shu's studio is about to collapse, and is almost bankrupt, actually. The situation is far less serious, but Vivi Lin's parents don't know that. They don't dare to ask Troy Shu directly and can only inquire indirectly. The information they got is, the studio is heavily in debt and has been confronted multiple times by creditors with a group of people. Evidence. I brought bodyguards to block the door. The studio is unable to make ends meet, and many employees have already left for other jobs. Evidence. Ju Sai and others have left. The studio is in deep crisis. And Troy Shu is overwhelmed by it. Evidence is that Troy Shu has been noticeably distant towards Vivi Lin and her family lately. Multiple pieces of evidence piled up, combined with being misled by ill-intentioned individuals. Vivi Lin's parents developed the idea of having Vivi Lin break up with Troy Shu, of course, before parting ways. They definitely want to squeeze out one last sum of money. They might not have figured out how to get that last sum of money, but it's okay, I'll help them. I compiled the evidence of Troy Shu and Vivi Lin's relationship and posted it online, hiring internet trolls to boost the hype. Soon, the story of a certain social man deceiving an innocent high school girl became widely known. To add drama, I also wrote about my own experiences with Troy Shu, portraying him as a scumbag who abandoned his longtime girlfriend who had endured hardships with him and deceived a minor. I had intended to wait until the story gained enough traction before revealing the identities of Troy Shu and Vivi Lin, but I didn't expect the public's enthusiasm for gossip to be so high. They ended up digging up all the details themselves. Accounts claiming to be insiders also posted many photos of the two, judging by the backgrounds. They were likely taken by Vivi Lin's classmates who had spotted them near the school. Scumbag, the original spouse, the mistress, especially since the mistress is a minor. This kind of sensational story always attracts attention. I even received interview requests from journalists. I turned down the journalists' requests, but Vivi Lin's parents did not. Vivi Lin's status as a minor gave them an excuse. They insisted that their daughter was innocent and naive, completely deceived by the malicious scumbag, and vowed to take him to court to seek justice for their daughter. The situation blew up, and Troy Shu became famous in a way he never wanted. Due to the attention received, everyone supported Vivi Lin's parents in suing Troy Shu. They found themselves in a difficult position, or perhaps wanted to extort more money, and actually took Vivi Lin to file a police report. Facing the lawsuit, Troy Shu's studio completely shut down, and the remaining members also sought other opportunities. I kept an eye on the lawsuit between him and Vivi Lin's family, occasionally giving advice to Vivi Lin's parents to help them squeeze more money out of Troy Shu. After more than 3 months of back and forth, Vivi Lin's parents eventually dropped the lawsuit and opted for a private settlement. Since then, Troy Shu and Vivi Lin have completely fallen out, turning from former lovers into enemies, losing both love and money. This outcome isn't too bad. I never expected Troy Shu to come looking for me. Hearing his voice again, I felt as if a lifetime had passed. Kira, I know you hate me, but could you open the door and listen to me for a few words? Open the door. How is that possible? I rolled my eyes and flatly refused. Didn't you say we should part on good terms before? Get lost, and stop bothering me. Kira, just listen to me for a few words, just a few. I didn't say a word. And he took my silence as agreement, starting to ramble on from behind the door. Kira, this might sound a bit surreal, and I know you might not believe it, but please hear me out first. The reason I acted that way at the wedding was because I had a dream. In that dream, we got married, we were deeply in love, and we even had a lovely daughter. But later something happened. Our daughter was gone, and so was your aunt. You were so heartbroken and filled with guilt that you broke down. And we ended up dying together in a car crash. That dream felt so real. I was terrified, and that's why I did what I did. He said a lot more, even listing some things that would happen next as proof, if I hadn't been reborn. I might have actually believed his nonsense after discovering that everything he listed had happened. What does something unexpected happened mean? What does it mean that I broke down in grief and self-blame after being reborn? I deliberately avoided thinking about my daughter, but Troy Shu brought it up at such a time and tried to gloss over her death. My chest heaved as I struggled to suppress the urge to open the door and slap him a few times. Troy Shu, stop making up stories. If we were truly in love, then what's the deal with Vivi Lin? I bet it's because Vivi Lin is your true love in your dreams, so you dumped me for her right away, and now that you've been dumped, you suddenly think the dream is fake. Troy Shu pounded on the door, explaining urgently, Kira, I was just scared. I dreamed that you were driving and hit me, and Vivi Lin saved me, so naturally, I developed some feelings for her, but I only felt gratitude toward her, which is why I took extra care of her family, who knew they were all in on it to deceive me. Kira, believe me, we've supported each other for so many years, just trust me this once, okay, trust my ass, even at a time like this. That scumbag still doesn't have a single truthful word to say. Realizing that his true love from a past life was no good, he came back to me, his faithful wife, hoping to make me the fool. I snorted coldly, Troy Shu, you want me to trust you, but did you trust me, just because of a dream? You treated me like that. What gives you the right to ask for my trust? The voice outside the door grew quieter. I suspect he was probably thinking to himself that those things were actually true. But whether true or not, in this lifetime, those can only be dreams. Troy Shu, if we really had a daughter, I think she would regret coming into this world, especially with a father like you. Kira, no, listen to me. Stop. What are you doing? Behave yourself. Don't move. Listening to the commotion at the door, I finally breathed a sigh of relief and opened it. Troy Shu was pinned to the ground by 2 police officers, his eyes wide with shock as he looked at me. You actually called the police, shouldn't I have? I looked down at him from above. With everything that happened recently, you didn't think I'd stay offline, did you? No, that's not it. It was that bitch who set me up. Kira, listen to me. Let me explain. Troy Shu was taken away by the police. Afraid of being entangled by him, I went on a trip with my aunt. I heard about him again in the news. At that time, Troy Shu was unshaven and had a sinister look in his eyes. He was the criminal who murdered the Lin family. Previous events have been brought up again by people, but public opinion is no longer solely condemning him for luring minors. Instead, voices defending him have emerged. After all, he killed someone, so he must have suffered a great injustice. I always thought the Lin family set him up in a honey trap. This guy is really unlucky. After casually browsing through the comments, I closed the webpage. I never thought Troy Shu would kill Vivi Lin's entire family, but in a way, he did it to vent my anger for me. Now, all those who wronged me have been punished, and it's time for me to start a new life. Everything will be fine.